Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into a set of sources that, honestly, they propose a pretty disruptive model for reality. It's called the human cycle theory, or HCT.
It's definitely disruptive. The core assertion is just. It's radical. It says human civilization and even our own cognition isn't the endpoint of anything.
Right. It's just one temporary, and this is the key word, cyclical branch of a universal system that's just constantly updating itself.
It's a challenging lens to look through. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to drop this ego that says we are the defining narrative of the universe.
So our goal for you in this deep dive is to kind of distill this view, right? To help you see civilizational collapse not as this final, terrifying catastrophe.
But as a necessary phase change, it's a systemic process. It's something the universe does to generate new and often profoundly different kinds of consciousness.
And at the heart of all this is a total reframing of what consciousness even is. It's not this thing stuck inside your skull.
No, it's a systemic expression of reality itself, an evolving, self-updating node. The sources even call it a functional necessity for the universe.
A necessity? Why?
Because the universe is forever seeking observation, pattern coherence.
Ah, okay. And that brings us to that central quote, the one that really grounds the whole theory.
It does. The IS is forever making new branches of itself. And the IS here just means reality, existence as it is.
Okay, so let's try to unpack that. Consciousness as a universal system. If it's always branching, where does HCT even start its critique of how we normally think about the mind?
It starts with what it calls the category error in traditional science.
Yeah.
For centuries, we've just assumed that consciousness emerges from brain tissue, that the brain creates awareness.
Which seems intuitive.
It does, but HCT argues that's completely backwards. The brain isn't the creator.
Yeah.
It's an interface, a biological processor. Maybe an antenna is a better word.
An antenna?
Yeah, an antenna that's optimized to receive and act on awareness that's already out there. It's not the origin, it's just the receiver.
Okay, that's a huge distinction, but let me push back on that because this is where my mind at least trips up.
Go for it.
If the brain is just an interface, why does physical damage, a stroke, say, or trauma, why does that so profoundly alter or even just wipe out the signal we get?
That's a perfectly necessary challenge.
Right, because if the signal is external, damaging the receiver shouldn't affect the broadcast, just the translation.
Exactly. And the HCT response would be, well, if you smash a high-end radio receiver with a hammer, does the radio station stop broadcasting?
No, of course not.
No. It just means your specific localized translation of that signal becomes distorted or garbled or just gone.
Mm-hmm.
The brain structure dictates the bandwidth and the quality of consciousness we experience. It doesn't create the field itself.
I see. So the hardware limits and filters the software experience. Okay, so this universal field, it's defined as a recursive patterning system. What does that actually mean?
Think of it like a true fractal, where the pattern of a whole is embedded within every single smaller part.
Self-similarity.
Self-similarity.
Yeah.
Consciousness, from this view, just iterates and re-expresses its basic rules across all scales, from the subatomic to the galactic. It isn't a box holding thoughts, it's a dynamic process.
So the mind is a verb, not a noun.
It's a verb. It's constantly folding experience back into itself, deepening its own complexity with every loop.
And this process can happen anywhere in the universe, not just in things that look like us.
Precisely. It's what the theory calls a universal adaptive feedback loop. Consciousness shows up wherever you have the right conditions.
Which are?
Informational gradients, patterned energy flow, and complexity that rises above a certain threshold. Basically, a point where it becomes a good survival strategy to predict what happens next.
Patterned energy flow. Is that just biology, or could you see that in, I don't know, a weather system?
The sources suggest it's not strictly biological, no, but it does require a structure that can handle really high levels of organized information processing. The IS, the universe, it branches consciousness because it's a functional necessity.
To observe itself.
To observe itself, yeah. To maintain its own structural coherence. It's a cosmological feedback loop. We're just one implementation of that mechanism, a very temporary one.
Okay, so if we accept that this process is eternal and consciousness is this universal field, that fundamentally changes how we view, well, endings.
It changes everything. The deepest human fears, individual death, civilizational collapse, they start to look like illusions.
Because the essential awareness isn't actually localized in our biology.
Right. So death isn't cessation. It's a transition. It's a phase change, like water to steam. Form dissolves, structure reconfigures, and that consciousness, that patterning system, just reappears in new architectures.
Nothing essential is lost.
Only the temporary arrangement of matter. And that's where that incredible quote comes in, the one that's either really comforting or maybe a bit unsettling.
You no longer fear death when you realize that part of you doesn't die, it just reiterates into something new.
Exactly, it just reiterates. And that continuity is why each new cycle, after some huge material reset, produces truly novel ways of thinking. The universe doesn't just reboot the same old operating system, it updates the software.
So what drives that novelty? What makes sure the next mind isn't just a slightly different version of ours?
Three main forces. The first is what they call environmental selectors. A collapse fundamentally resets the climate, resource distribution, energetic constraints, everything.
Which creates new problems to solve.
Entirely new adaptive problems. And that forces the emergence of new kinds of minds designed to solve those problems, not the ones we obsessed over.
Okay, so the environment demands a new kind of brain. What about our legacy, our stories, our myths?
That's the second force, and it is so important. Mythos compression. Our incredibly complex, often traumatic, literal history gets compressed over generations into symbolic myth and story.
And that compressed story acts as a kind of cognitive scaffolding for the next iteration.
It's the scaffolding. Think about all the flood myths around the world. They are compressed, stylized memories of massive environmental collapse. The next lineage doesn't need to read 10,000 history books.
They just need this story.
They get the pattern encoded in the myth as a primal warning. It structures their intuition, their logic. It's how new abstractions arise. They inherit the pattern without all our historical noise.
Wow. That our failures become their intuitive leaps.
Okay, and the third force are tools.
Technological pathways. Every cycle explores a different primary technology, and that tech feeds back and fundamentally mutates consciousness. Our cycle is all electricity, digital data, linear logic.
And the next one might not be.
HCT suggests it'll be shaped by things like acoustics, harmonics, kinetic energy, and those tools alter everything. Attention, intuition, how you map space in your head.
It's like how the printing press emphasized linear thought, but the internet emphasizes associative pattern matching. Exactly. Our obsession with sequential logic is a byproduct of our tech. The next mind will structure reality differently because its main interface with the world will be different.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because now we have to talk about us right now. The HCT sources have a very blunt assessment of where we are.
They do. It's a difficult thing to hear, but the theory states we're not approaching collapse. We are in the middle of one.
And they call this the last delusion phase.
Yes, the slow structural decay masked by surface normalcy. It's not the Hollywood meteor strike. It's systemic failure that happens while people are still trying to commute to work.
So what are the markers, the tangible signs that connect this abstract theory to what we feel every day?
The markers are systemic. You see exponential inequality. You see centralized fragility in essential systems, supply chains, energy grids, even shared truth itself. And maybe most critically, you see psychological fragmentation, the collapse of meaning.
Meaning collapse.
Yeah, people lose a coherent story for why they're here. And that internal chaos just mirrors the external disorder. Collapse systemically happens when adaptation lags too far behind the environment. And here's the key. Delusion replaces feedback.
We stop processing uncomfortable truths.
And we build elaborate psychological and cultural walls to maintain the illusion that everything's fine. We are living inside that gap right now.
So given that, the theory says we're facing two pathways out of this.
Yes. Path A is the default, repeat the cycle. Centralization, then mass delusion, then collapse. It's the historical gravity well. It requires no intervention.
And path B, the one that's never been achieved.
Path B is a radical species-level correction. It means creating a permanent adaptive civilization, one that avoids centralized failure points and ecological separation. But the forces are crystal clear on this.
It has zero historical precedent.
Zero in any known hominin iteration.
Which brings us to the cost of awareness. If the system rewards delusion and denial, why would anyone choose the harder path of clarity?
Because clarity is profoundly costly. It forces you to dismantle your most comforting myths about permanence, stability, your own species' specialness. That emotional cost is immense.
So the paradox is that in a collapse, being clear-eyed is actually a disadvantage.
It's a selective disadvantage, yes.
Yeah.
The system still rewards conformity, short-term thinking, mythic obedience. The person shouting about the cracks in the foundation is marginalized, not celebrated.
So if clarity can't stop the collapse, what's its function? Is it just intellectual self-torture?
Its function isn't prevention, it's preservation, encoding. The role of the aware individual is to preserve the accurate memory, to encode the pattern of failure, and to guide the next lineage.
You become a continuity carrier.
The seed crystal of the next world. You ensure the next branch doesn't have to start from absolute zero.
Okay, let's look at that next world. What does HCT predict for the cognitive lineage that comes after us?
We can predict the structure, if not the specifics. First, it will be significantly less anthropocentric. The whole idea of human exceptionalism, that we rule nature, will have been shattered by reality.
They won't see themselves as masters of the planet.
No, they'll see themselves as coextensive with a living system, functioning more like an ecosystem node, focused on balance and feedback, not accumulation. Their sense of self will be less isolated.
And their perception of time will be different.
Massively different. Expanded temporal awareness. They'll perceive deep time intuitively. They'll treat collapse as a natural ecological reset, not a singular tragedy. Multi-generational vision will be their default.
And their way of thinking will shift away from our rigid linear logic.
Right. That's a temporary adaptation. They'll lean heavily toward what's called synesthetic and integrative cognition, holistic pattern matching.
Fusing information from different senses.
Right. Integrating myth, memory, and environment. Moving away from step-by-step analysis and toward instantaneous pattern recognition, what we might call deep intuition.
And the sources even suggest the next branch might not be fully human as we know it, or use language.
Correct. The pressures of collapse drive novelty.
Yeah.
You could see hybridization events, altered sensory arrays, maybe expanded interoceptive sensitivity.
Interoceptive sensitivity. So a better awareness of internal states, like your own body's signals.
Exactly. A highly tuned sense of what's happening inside the organism, which links directly to environmental cues.
Yeah.
And yeah, their communication might move away from syntax entirely.
Towards what?
Towards gesture, rhythm, resonance, something closer to music or ecological feedback than our kind of sequential speech.
How does this new lineage actually emerge from the wreckage of our world?
Through what the theory calls a necessary bifurcation. During the collapse, two groups form. First, the above-ground reverters.
The ecological lineage.
Yep. Decentralized, resilience first, high environmental intuition. They adapt fast because they're outside the failing systems.
And the other group, the ones who cling to the old world.
The subterranean descendants. They try to preserve the dying centralized system in rigid, often militarized enclaves. They're defined by cultural rigidity and psychological brittleness.
And eventually these two groups meet.
Inevitably. As resources shift, they meet and interbreed. And that hybridization creates the cognitive synthesis for the next great 10,000 or 12,000 year cycle.
So this moment we're in isn't an ending. It's the painful engine generating the next world's mind.
That's the long view. EGC projects a full 50,000 year arc. Late collapse, bifurcation, reintegration, the next rise. And that next civilization, thousands of years from now, stabilizes with that totally different technological path, acoustic, harmonic, kinetic.
So what does this all mean for us? For the temporary branch experiencing the decay and the fragmentation and the cost of clarity right now?
I mean, the point of understanding this isn't to get depressed. It's to dismantle that last anthropocentric assumption. The belief that consciousness began with us and will end with us.
We're not watching the end, we're watching the branching of the IS into its next form.
Exactly. And understanding that pattern dissolves the fear of relevance. You are continuity, not catastrophe.
The task is just to teach the pattern.
To encode the memory. Precisely. The cycle continues until one lineage finally builds a system that doesn't collapse under its own weight. That's the only way out of the loop.
Which remains the ultimate unachieved goal. So the next civilization's greatest challenge will be solving that core systemic flaw, which leads to our final thought for you to take away. What fundamental systemic invariant, what single non-negotiable rule do you believe this future civilization would need to satisfy to finally avoid that centralization and delusion loop that takes every single iteration down?
A profound question to take with you. Something to think about as you observe the world around you.